All right, so welcome to Connect with the Chamber today. We are discussing about resilience and workplace environments and how to put the two marmalade words together. We are here today with our guest speaker, Lynette Todkill from Drake International. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you here, and we are very excited to learn more about the subject, understanding the place of life and work, and even family, just a little bit of touching back to basics. So I'll leave it up to you.
Okay. Thanks, Sam. And my first port of call is always to say a huge thank you to everybody who has jumped on the call. I know life is completely manic at the moment, and to make time out to sit in one of these seminars takes some doing. But I do believe it adds significant value, and I'm hoping that we can provide you with some tools and some skills today to take you forward. But thank you for making yourself available. And then, as always, to the Chamber for coordinating all of this and making our lives so simple. I just need to pitch up and talk about my topic. Everything else is taken care of. So thank you for looking after us so well. Yeah. And also for the valuable contribution you make to the business community in East London. I think the idea now, particularly for businesses to connect and work communally, is becoming more and more important, and the chambers are so important in facilitating that. And then to my own team, Gillian and Nicole from our marketing division, thank you as always for your support in this process and for helping me be able to give this information over as we were doing it today. So yeah, those are my thanks. In terms of questions, guys, you're welcome as we go along. If something pops to mind, just to either pop something in the chat box or to stick up your hand and we can take it from there. Or if you prefer to wait until the end, that is also great. I will be making my contact details available at the end of the presentation. You're quite welcome to reach out to me via phone or email afterwards. I'm happy to engage with you. And then, as Sam mentioned, this is being recorded and it will be placed on YouTube platforms for you to access. I'll also be sending the slide deck through and some additional add-ons that you guys might be able to use going forward. Okay, so I will hopefully be touching on a number of different areas, although the topic is resilience in the workforce. This is a skill set that most certainly crosses lines, something that you can use in your personal life, with your children, in your religious organizations, across the board. So this is a skill set that by no means is limited to the workplace. Okay, so just a bit about me and where we're from. My name is Lynette. I'm the HR and Training Manager at Drake Personnel South Africa. So I'm based in our Port Elizabeth branch, although we do have branches nationally throughout the country. We now have very happily set up presence in East London as well, which is why we are collaborating with the business chambers. So we are very excited to be moving into the space and looking forward to interacting with you guys as a business community. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of an idea of what our pathway today is going to be, I always like to know where I'm going. So we're going to touch a little bit on what does resilience actually mean. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but I just wanted to conceptualize for you how I'm interpreting it so that you get an understanding of that. And then very important for me, why is this such an important topic now? I think a lot of people are saying, well, there's so many other things that we've got to focus on right now in terms of the practicalities of the economy and COVID and all of this, but there's a very real reason why this topic is so valuable at this juncture. And then just to unpack the concepts a little bit for you in two levels. One, how does the resilient individual look like? And how can we make our workforce as a whole resilient? Because despite what one might think, even if your individuals are resilient at an individual level, it doesn't necessarily mean that your organization will function at a resilience level either. So there is a technique around that. And then what I like to build in is the next generation. Our kids are in unprecedented times at the moment. The way of schooling has been completely changed. The way they interact and socialize has been completely changed. They're entering a workforce that now no longer looks anything like it used to. And so there's a very real need for us as parents and for individuals employing new entrants into the workplace to look at how do we build that resilience in our younger generation. Okay. Who am I? I hate this slide. I deliberately picked a picture that is probably very deceiving. I did the math the other day and realized that that photo was probably taken in 2000, 2001. So I think that's a bit of false advertising on my part. But if I had to show you what I looked like post-COVID, yeah, that would not be pretty. So just so that you have an understanding of where I'm coming at this topic from, I did get my start in psychology and then moved over into this broader social sciences in terms of sociology. So my interest has always been from a social research perspective and translating into how we can take our knowledge of an individual and make it of use to society, to organizations as a whole, to our broader global family. So these topics are always of interest to me. I'm the kind of person who's Googling this kind of stuff on the side and reading the books. I realize that not everybody has that kind of interest in it. So I'm going to try and make it as practical for your workplaces and your personal lives as possible. Then I am also for myself a registered psychometrist and have got 15 years experience in human resources and training and development. So I've had an opportunity to see how these factors are put into effect into the workplace, and I've been blessed to see organizations where it has been done really well and where it has had a significant impact. So these aren't just abstract concepts that you hear about and go out the window. These are really things that can be applied and can have a very meaningful contribution to you, your family, and your organization. So as always, I like to start off with a bit of a definition so that we're on the same page in terms of what resilience means. And I came across this one and I really, really like it. It's not an overly scientific definition, but it's one that resounded with me. And it's that resilience is that quality that allows some people to be knocked down by life and come back stronger than ever, rather than letting failure overcome them and drain their resolve. They find a way to rise from the ashes. And there's a couple of things there that stand out for me quickly. It's that we're all going to be knocked down by life. There's absolutely not one of us that's going to come out of this experience unscathed in any way. And so once we've embraced that reality, the importance of resilience is no longer up for debate. Because if we're all going to be experiencing these challenges in one or other form, if you don't develop this as a skill, you are not going to live the life that you deserve and that you could possibly be living. And not only do you lose from that, but all those around you do as well. So it's certainly within all of our interests to understand what this means and to try and develop it in ourselves and in others. And then the second part that sort of really stands out to me is that they don't let their failure overcome them and drain their resolve. I think, you always come across people, some are faced challenge after challenge and they're actually invigorated by the process versus those that you see something as an obstacle and it automatically drains them of everything and they withdraw from the larger community. And that says to me that there is something that we can do, a skill that we can acquire or a perspective that we can adopt that will allow us to turn that viewpoint around and to actually start gaining energy from these events that is going around us to push us and accelerate us forward. Okay, so that's where I'm coming at from the concept of resilience. It's not a scientific thing for me. It's one that has real and valuable personal meaning. In my research, I came across this, and it really did resound with me. There is what they refer to in Japan as the art of kintsugi, and I'm probably totally butchering the pronunciation of that. But the concept is a simple one. They actually have a practice where they take pottery that has been broken and they put it back together using various metals, precious metals like gold, liquid, silver, and lacquer, to put that piece of broken pottery back together. And two things stand out to me there. One is it's not simply something that they break and throw away and view as useless. They look at this broken piece of pottery, and the understanding is this can be put together, can be put back together. And secondly is that it can then become something of beauty out of it. So it's not something like a chipped teacup that you leave at the back of your cupboard and you never bring out for the good guests because you're embarrassed about this chip that it has. It is a piece of artwork that actually goes on display for everybody to see where these cracks are. And then the fact that they invest things like precious metals into the process of putting it back together. So something broken is taken, and then a lot of time, effort, and money is put into making it functional again and making it beautiful and something that is of value. And that is, to me, very important in how we view ourselves and the mistakes that we potentially make, or when we feel that we are broken as human beings. At that point in our lives, we feel useless. We feel that we need to be hidden from view, and that's often where we do withdraw. And this is telling us no. Yes, it's a difficult period, but if you forge ahead and you put the work in and the effort in, you're going to turn out to be something much stronger, much more beautiful, and much more unique than you were before. And so I really like this concept as it relates to the whole idea of resilience. But what I do just want to differentiate, when I was reading up on it, on the topic, it was very much emphasized that it's considered a piece of art. So it does go on display, but it's important at the same time that it remains functional. It's a pot. It's meant to hold something, to serve a purpose. And that insinuates to me that while, yes, it is an art, it's also a craft, which means that in terms of resilience, it's a skill set that we need to acquire, and we need to practice it and practice it daily to ensure that we can overcome those challenges and can move ourselves to the next level. Very often with these things, we think if we read enough self-help books, maybe attend a webinar or two, that we'll absorb all this information internally and it'll just happen. And I'm here to tell you, unfortunately, that that's not the case. Everything that I share with you today is going to be stuff that you're going to have to try out, practice, find out what works for you, and really put into daily effect to have an impact. Then this is a debate that we've often had. You know, some people argue that resilience is something that you're born with. You know, some people can just get over things. They pick themselves up fairly easily and carry on. And some of us aren't blessed with that particular personality trait. Resilience isn't a personality trait. Resilience is a skill, and it is an attitude that can be developed. So yes, while some people are naturally inclined that way, you're natural optimists, the good news is that we can all adopt it. We can all learn it and put it into practice, but it takes effort and it takes work on your part. Okay, so this is not something that you are simply born with. So the question that I mentioned, and when I was discussing the pathway, is why are we having this kind of a webinar now? I mean, we've been inundated with webinars on COVID legislation and terse applications and labor law, etc., etc. And those are very evident in terms of why they need to happen now. But why resilience? Why are we looking at soft skills at this particular juncture? And for me, there are two events that coincided to make it absolutely essential. The one's been coming for a while, and that is the fourth industrial revolution that we've been talking about for quite some time, and we are now currently in. So for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with the terminology, the fourth industrial revolution is that notion of we are moving into a changing working landscape where a lot of jobs are going to fall away because they're going to become automated, or the way in which we do typical jobs are going to change because of new technology coming in the door. And over time, that typically has been a slower process as we've developed. Now you guys will know, one day you purchase a laptop and it has a certain software on it. 2 months down the line, a friend buys something and it's vastly updated and massively changed. Everything is moving at a much more rapid pace. And we're having to work very hard to adapt. And it really is a case of adapt or die. Gone are the days of you doing the same job for 25 years at the same company and then retiring. We're all having to look at acquiring new skill sets, possibly changing career paths completely. They talk now about the gig economy, where people are no longer just doing one job, but they're doing a number of different jobs. People are having to enter into the entrepreneurial space because the days of corporates simply employing people is not always viable. So there was a lot of change already happening on that front. And we've been talking about it for some time. And a huge component of that does link up with resilience, because to be flexible, to be agile, to be willing to take those steps to change requires that you see it as a challenge as opposed to an obstacle, and be willing to try something new, fail, try again. Okay, so those two concepts were very much linked. And then COVID happened, and everything accelerated at a pace that I think is still making us dizzy. Things that have been discussed for years, like remote working, like flexible working hours, et cetera, all suddenly had to be fast-tracked. Companies that didn't have much by way of IT infrastructure suddenly had to get up and running. Otherwise, they were going to cease to function. There's an auditing firm in Sandton that has now completely shut down their physical offices because after COVID, they realized they can all work remotely. So a lot of these things have now been fast-tracked. And in a dramatic way that affected absolutely everybody. There isn't a single business sector that hasn't been affected by this. And more importantly, there isn't a single aspect of your life that hasn't been affected by this. This isn't just your work. This is how you educate your children. This is how you socialize with your friends and your family. This is with how you go and engage in a religious meeting, how you have a wedding. So every single aspect of our lives was changed as a result of COVID. And the only way that we are not only going to get through it, but flourish, is if we embrace the skills and concepts around resilience and put it into practice. What I will say, look, I'm not one who enjoys change. Those who are on the call that work with me will know I like my plans. When they get moved around, I'm not always happy. But sometimes we need change, and sometimes the only way it's going to happen is if it's dramatic. People as a whole are resistant to change. So one can choose to look at COVID negatively, or one can choose to look at it as being that accelerator for the change that had to come. Just now doing it in a way that is no longer optional, and people are having to adapt or die. Okay, so that is why when we were looking at topics to present, we thought, okay, now's the time we have to push this particular button. Okay, so what does a resilient person look like? That's always a good starting point for me. So if you look at point one, a person that is resilient is able to reframe their interpretation or perception of what is happening in their life. Okay. So instead of seeing absolutely everything as being negative, they can take a situation that is on its face negative and go and look a little bit deeper and ask themselves the question, did something good actually come out of this? Yes, I know it was difficult, it was stressful, and it certainly was challenging, but can I identify at least something good that has come out of this? So let's take COVID as an example. I can list the ways in which it's been negative ad nauseum, but what positive stuff has come out of COVID? Well, for me, one of the positive things is the idea of becoming more flexible. I've had to adapt the way in which I do things, and now I'm much more comfortable with changes that happen because it's sort of become a day-to-day. So that's good for me. Alternatively, people who've maybe been pushing the whole idea of working remotely have now been afforded that opportunity, and their organizations have seen that, oh, okay, this does actually work. And so that has finally become a reality in certain organizations. So if you take the time to look at what is happening, virtually always you can find something positive that is attached to it. And for those who are sort of naturally resilient, that comes automatically. For the rest of us, it's an active exercise that we have to engage in. So when something comes up and we perceive it as negative, we need to take that step back and have a look at, okay, what positive came out of here, and start focusing on that. Okay, secondly, and this one I really, really do like, identify what you can control. There's so many things with the stuff that's happening at the moment that we just cannot fix. We got the news the other day that our GDP had dropped by 50-odd%. That's something that we as an individual cannot go and fix. It's going to have massive impact on us. We're going to have to deal with the fallout from that. We're going to have to change our approach in our businesses and organizations, but it's not something that you as an individual can control. So you need to go and look at what are the things that can contribute to overcoming that challenge, or can turn that challenge around that I do have control over. Okay, so for example, in our organization, we've been looking at how can we operate lean on a lean structure that is going to be beneficial to us, our clients, and our employees. Those are things we can control. In an individual space, your own personal finances is something that you have some control over. So identify those areas, action them, and that simple process of taking action and focusing makes you feel that you are progressing. You're a little bit more in control. Okay, then point 3 is vitally important, and I don't think we do this enough, is seeking out support. And COVID certainly made this difficult. A lot of restrictions was placed on how we could and could not interact. But we are social beings by nature, and you cannot go through everything alone. Social support has been shown again and again and again to be one of the main differentiators between people that can overcome challenges and those who buckle under them. What I would say was a positive with regards to COVID was on 2 levels. One, it helped you identify who in your life is truly of value to you and is truly that aspect of support, because those are the people that you still remained in contact with. You found a way. You Skyped them, you FaceTimed them, you were using WhatsApp like no one's business, you were phoning, you're now meeting them at coffee shops. So it helped you to identify who in your network is truly of support and truly of value to you. It also might very glaringly have shown you how you've allowed those relationships to fall by the wayside. In our day-to-day where we're so busy and we see our work colleagues, it becomes easy to forget that we haven't actually seen a good mate in the last 3 months. Whereas now, because that interaction with staff, clients, etc., has been limited, we're now very much aware of the fact that, hey, it's been a solid week and the only person I've seen is my spouse. And that's not necessarily a good thing. So important for us to relook at those relationships and put the work and the effort into it that it deserves. And then finally, point 4, people who are resilient focus on challenges rather than viewing it purely as an obstacle. Okay, so how do you do that? And what they've realized through research is that people who sort of hit a wall and automatically stop are focused purely on the result. So this thing that is happening that is preventing them from achieving that result is automatically viewed as negative because it's a barrier. It's not allowing you to achieve what you want to achieve. And they throw up hands and view the whole situation negatively. Versus those that are process-driven. People who are process-driven realize, okay, this just means it's going to take me maybe a little bit longer to get to the result. Or I might need to adapt and change what that result is going to look like. Or maybe it's just a different pathway that I'm going to be following. So they don't automatically assume that this is not going to have a positive resolution. They just see it as part of the process. And as long as progress is being made, whether it looks like you originally thought it was going to look like, that's not the point, as long as there is progress. So these are 4 items that you can embrace personally, that you can embrace as an organization, and ensure that these things are in place to allow you to exercise that resilience in those times of challenges. Okay. Excuse me while I take a swig of water. Okay, then if we look at the individuals, again, they've done excessive research on the topic, and they've tried to sort of consolidate what are the areas as an individual that you need to focus on to enhance your resilience levels. And they identified 6 particular pillars. They started off with confidence, and I think that one is sort of self-explanatory. We need to have self-belief. So if you have self-esteem that is completely in the toilet, absolutely no way are you going to be able to overcome a challenge, because you're not going to believe that you have the skill set or the capability of doing it. So we need to really go and do some self-reflection and have a look at, who am I? What am I good at? Because we are all good at something. There's not any one of us that doesn't have a strength or a skill. And sometimes you're not going to be able to be the best person to identify that. And you need to see who in your circle, who do you trust that knows you well enough to be able to tell you or guide you in terms of, okay, what are the things that you're good at? So that you can get an accurate perception of who you are and what you can do. Once you've done that and you know the stuff that you're good at, then you know which aspects you can control and you can start focusing on those. So for example, if you are a very good in terms of maths and numbers and what have you, that can allow you to exert control over the financial aspects of your personal life, and you can use that to overcome certain challenges. So maybe you're not advancing as far in your career as you'd like to, you feel that that's because of a lack of learning and development. Well, you've got a strength area in terms of your financial management that allows you to open up some funds to go and study further, to get the skill set that you need to move into that next phase of your working life. Okay, so identify what you're good at, use that to exert the control where you can, and advance you in the areas where you feel that you're lacking. Okay. Then adaptability, I must amend, sorry, somebody has a question? Okay. Adaptability is one I will say is difficult for me. It requires that we be flexible thinkers, and I do tend to get set in my ways and my routines, and I find a way to solve a particular problem, and when things get thrown out of whack, it takes me a while to recalibrate and get back on track. but it is a skill set that we do need to acquire. And I think it's one that COVID has forced us to do now. So what we need to do is, when we are approaching our typical day-to-day tasks, occasionally stop and ask ourselves, I've always done it this way, but that doesn't mean that this is the only way of doing it. Is there maybe a different way that I could approach that, and try it and see if that works out better for you? Ask the opinions of other people to see how they approach certain things, and if you can incorporate that into it. So we've got to get out of the mindset that my way is the only way, even if it has worked for you in the past, because our environments change. And as soon as that happens, the way in which we do things has to adapt as well. Okay, and then, as I said, review and refine. So, I mean, this is going to be a process of trying and failing and trying and succeeding, and that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with sometimes trying something and it not working out. As long as you're learning from the process, that is really all that you need. Okay, and this is one where South Africans fall flat. I'm sorry, positivity. Okay, as a whole, I think our culture has become pretty negative. If you spend too much time on Facebook and Instagram and watching the news and looking through, various other social media platforms, the negative stuff trends quicker. It's the stuff that we are constantly bombarded with. And so it becomes very easy to believe that everything is completely negative if that's all that we're seeing. There was a debate surrounding the fact that, the statement was made that society today is much more violent than what it has previously been. And your anthropologists are saying that's not actually true. I mean, you go and look at the Crusades and everything that happened during that time. There was excessive violence during that particular period of time. Just not everybody was exposed to it. Only the people that were directly involved were. But because we live in an environment where we have access to global information at the touch of a button, and often before it has even been fact-checked, we fall into this trap of thinking that everything is just awful. Okay. So we need to force ourselves to get out of that as a mindset. So when you are exposed to a situation, you need to stop and ask yourself, look, is this as bad as I think it is? Or is there actually something positive to this? But I will say it has to be realistic optimism. You can't be a complete Pollyanna and think that everything is hunky-dory, because that prohibits you from seeing actual problems and changing them. So it's about reframing the situation, getting input from others to see what is the reality. Is it really as bad as I think? Or are there certain aspects that I have control over it? And that can help you steer your energy. So if you've identified something that, yes, is completely negative, it's something that you do not have control over, move it one side. If it's something that is actually, there are elements of positivity to it, there is stuff that can change, and you have some control over that, you can direct your energy accordingly. Okay. Then the fourth pillar is perspective. So psychologists will tell you that we fall into what they refer to as cognitive traps. Cognitive, a fancy word for how we think. And some of us often are skewed to negative thought patterns. And we just accept it because it's how we've always thought about things. And what they're saying is you've got to challenge your own thinking. So when a thought pops up into your head like, oh, I can't possibly do this, don't just accept it as being truthful. Challenge yourself. Is it true? Can I really not do this? Why do I think I can't do this? What are the barriers or the causes that I think is going to stop me from being able to accomplish this? And then getting the insight into, okay, no, wait, that was an assumption. It was an erroneous assumption. I can actually develop the skill set to get past this. Or I know somebody who can help me get past this. Or the answer might very well be, okay, no, sorry, this is an issue I'm not equipped with. And then you can let it go. Okay. Then the area of mastery is the idea that we mustn't ever get or lose the notion that we are on a lifelong learning expedition. with things changing the way that it does constantly, we cannot afford just to rely on what we've always known, what we've always done. We've got to constantly be trying to grow in all spheres, whether it be as in your job, to learn a new skill set there, whether it be to learn more about your spouse so that you can have a happier marriage, whether it's how you parent, or becoming a better friend, or learning a little bit more about yourself so that you can grow and develop. You've got to get into that as a habit. And I know it's difficult because our days are insane. And you get home and you're exhausted and you're tired. And the last thing you want to do is now do some self-reflection and go read up on certain things. But the irony being, when you start engaging in those activities, you actually start to get energy and stimulation from it. It starts to excite you. And it starts to help you overcome those issues that are draining you on a daily basis. And it creates energy for you to focus and direct. When they were looking at what skills is most important in the area of the fourth industrial revolution, one of them was the ability to continue to learn and develop. I would much rather, as an HR manager, take somebody on board who has less experience and less knowledge, but who has the enthusiasm and the ability to learn. Because I can point them in any direction and they will continue to grow and to develop. Whereas somebody who doesn't have that attitude, I'm going to be able to get to a certain level of performance, and that's where it's going to remain. Okay, and then an area that I know that we are all definitely not taking care of ourselves is stamina. And with stamina, they're talking basically about wellness. So if I look at our health rates and typically how South Africans eat, exercise, and engage in all that good stuff, we're not taking adequate care of ourselves. And so we don't have the resources needed to see us through these particular challenging times and crises. And that's everything from exactly what I said, you know, watching what you eat, getting a bit of exercise, engaging on a social level with people, getting that support system in place, reaching out to professionals when you need that added support. All of that gives you the energy reservoir to tackle the problems that come along. And if we don't pay enough attention to this, you're not going to be able to get through. So it is something that, again, as adults, and I think particularly the parents among us, tend to forget about. We put our well-being last on the list, and that is not going to allow you to do everything else that you need to survive. Okay, so those are the 6 areas for individuals. And obviously, you know, it looks daunting, and I would never ever say that you need to tackle all of this at once. But, you know, I think spend some time, look at it and see where are the areas that you think you are lacking. So for me, example, if I give it a brief overview, the areas of confidence and adaptability are probably 2 of the issues that I need to focus on, and focus on that first and make incremental changes in those spaces to give you that additional energy to tackle the rest of the stuff as it comes along. Okay, and as you go through life, these things will change. You know, as your confidence builds, you might find that your mastery improves, but you've become jaded by life and your positivity is lower. So it's not something that's going to remain constant, but it's areas that we need to revisit periodically to make sure that we are on the right path. Okay, so that's the individual. But most of you've come here through the business chamber. So you either work for an organization or you run an organization. And so the very real question is going to be, okay, well, what effect does resilience actually have in the workplace? Are the 2 connected in any way that warrants us having this discussion? And the answer is simply yes. Okay, so the American College of Occupational and Environmental Medicine did a study. And what they found is that people whose resilience levels are low suffer higher levels of depression. That results in absenteeism at work, or even what we in HR refer to as presenteeism, where you're there but you're not performing as you should be. And productivity is significantly lowered. So we already know the answer to that question. If I'm not a resilient individual, I'm not going to be functioning to full capacity in the workplace. So the next question was asked then, okay, well, what factors in the workplace negatively impact on my resilience? Because this is a two-way relationship. If I'm resilient, my organization benefits. But if my organization doesn't provide me with the environment with which to practice that resilience, I'm not going to be able to reach those levels. And they've identified three key areas in an organization. If a person has too much demand placed on them, whether it be workload, the complexity of work, or expectations that are simply too high, that is one factor that impacts on the ability to be resilient. Secondly, the less influence they have in occupational space, the less resilient they're going to be. Because if you are faced constantly with these high demands, high expectations, but you have absolutely no control over how you do things, what resources you can use, who you can reach out to, your control completely disappears, and that profoundly impacts on your resilience levels. And then thirdly, the support aspect. Is the organization stepping up in terms of providing adequate resources for the individual to do their job? Are they providing necessary support in terms of coaching and mentoring so that people can develop and learn? Are they creating support in a way that creates a trust environment where the individual can take certain risks without fear of being victimized as a result? So both parties in this relationship have a role to play. As an individual, I need to try and make sure that I am practicing the skill sets that I need to build up my resilience, but the workplace plays such a vital role in our day-to-day lives that they need to also be aware of. If I want my employees to be resilient, I can't just make them attend a webinar and expect them to put everything into practice. I've got to create an environment that allows them to actually live out practically. Okay. So out of interest, they went and they did a further study, and this was done in Britain, to look at what are the biggest things at work that are currently placing strain on people's resilience. And you'll see there from the bottom are the ones that had the highest impact. So it's your internal relationships and politics in the workplace, too much work or work that is set at too fast a pace, when people feel they are being criticized at a personal level, when they are constantly asked to work outside of their comfort zone, when there is too many upheavals in their personal lives, or when they are juggling day-to-day working and your life, family responsibilities, and then when they are challenged in terms of work matters. Now, what I feel is important to highlight is none of the things on the left is inherently negative or is something that you can remove out of the equation. There's always going to be office politics. You're always going to have times when you are expected to work beyond what you think you can do. There are going to be times when you are asked to work outside your comfort zone, and you actually need to be. How do you stretch as an employee if you're not occasionally asked to do something a little bit more advanced? So all of these factors are going to be present at work. It comes back to those 4 points that we looked at in the beginning, in how you can reframe the situation, identify which areas you have control over, get a proper perception of what is happening, reach out for support and help, and use that to weather these particular aspects. So for example, if we're looking at you constantly being taken outside of your comfort zone. So in your mind, you might interpret that as I'm being set up for failure. Whereas your manager might be viewing it as, I think this person has real potential and I'm trying to develop and upskill them. So you need to look at it as almost a challenge. Okay, so they're wanting me to learn and develop. What can I do? What is it within my control to ease the fear that I'm having in this regard? It might be looking at an online course. It might be touching base with somebody who is very experienced in that work area and getting a bit of coaching and mentoring so that I can actually do these tasks. It might be having that truthful conversation with your manager to say, I'm really appreciative of the fact that you're trying to stretch me. These are the things that I'm finding challenging. How can we work together to achieve this? So these things will never disappear, nor should they. It's your ability to look at it and have a proper perspective and put an action plan in place that allows you to actually capitalize on it. Okay. Then if you're trying to create, I mean, every organization should be trying to create high performance and resilient teams in the workplace, because everything is shifting to team focus now within an organization. Gone are the days where you can have 4 or 5 top performers and they can carry the entire company. You now need to have teams within the organizations that are collectively high functioning and are resilient. And what the research has shown us, they've gone and they've looked at 600 high performing teams globally. And based on the research that they've done there, they've identified sort of 5 areas that your teams need to focus on and work on to ensure that over time they develop into those resilient high performance teams. And the first thing that they say is that that team needs to have a clear direction. And I know particularly now that is something that is very difficult. Our business strategies, our way of doing work, our way of communicating, everything has gone out the window and has had to be re-looked at. And so at this particular point in time, I think a lot of people feel directionless and rudderless, which is making things difficult. But you can, again, reframe it and look at it as an opportunity to really look at, was my organization actually going in the right direction anyway? We've been on a specific pathway for years because it was part of our 5-year strat plan. But were we actually revisiting it regularly anyway to ensure that it was aligned with the direction that we should be going? And the answer to that might be no. And now we have that perfect opportunity as an organization to sit down and look at, okay, we're having to sort of start semi from scratch again. What collectively is our organization now going to adopt as our vision? Because that might very well have changed. Your reason for being, what you've wanted to achieve as an organization might have changed significantly now. What is our purpose? Again, you know, we've been providing maybe the same services, same product lines for years, and now that is no longer viable in the current economic environment. What is our purpose now? What does it look like? And what behaviors are tied into that? Okay, so it's a perfect opportunity now for management with collaboration with their teams to sit down and start answering those questions again. What is our vision? What is our purpose? And what is the practical behaviors that we expect to see to reinforce that vision and that purpose? Okay, secondly, they say these teams need to be connected. And again, that seems weird. We've been talking about moving to remote working, et cetera, but I think ironically enough for us, and we experienced this in our own organization, was that some of the teams actually started connecting more often when they were forced to work remotely than they were when they were in the same office space. We take it for granted when we are working around each other that we are actually meaningfully connecting and meaningfully interacting. And that is not always the case. A lot of the conversations that you have in passing are surface level conversations and aren't true connections. Whereas in this particular environment, all of a sudden managers were forced to put a structure in place in terms of how I connect with everybody. They were touching base on a personal level as well as a business level to create those relationships. And a lot of bonds have been formed that weren't there previously. And the reason why that connection is so important is because it creates that environment of trust and safety. Organizations now will only flourish if they are innovative and open to change. And I can tell you now, your workers will not be open to that if there isn't trust and there isn't safety, because who's going to take the risk of sticking up their hand to suggest a new idea or to take ownership of something if they are very much aware that if this fails in any way, I'm going to be thrown under the bus. And the only way you can build that trust and that safety is if there is regular and meaningful connection and communication with your staff members. Okay. Then the third pillar is that of alignment. Again, very important. We are now again at that juncture where we realize what we are going to be providing to our customers is maybe going to change. We as a company may now need to change our focus. We spoke about looking at whether our vision and purpose has to change. So at that juncture, we need to start making sure that the two are talking to each other. If we're going to change our vision and our purpose, it might very well mean that the clients we've been dealing with are no longer going to be the clients that we deal with, or we might have to deal with them in a different way. So we need to make sure that that alignment exists so that what we are doing as individuals within the organization matches what we are projecting to the outside world. And then performance areas, again, this is something that, you know, I think every organization has its performance management system that sits on a piece of paper, gets hauled out maybe once a year, looked at briefly, and only gets pulled out again when we undertaking disciplinary action. We need to relook at what we mean by performance and how we actually go and measure. Okay, so we need to start actively ensuring accountability, and that's from the top down. If I, as a senior manager, screw up, I need to be willing to put up my hand and accept responsibility for that, apologize where needed, learn, and put into place plans to make sure it doesn't happen again. Likewise, your lowliest employee, although I hate that term, needs to also realize that for whatever they are employed to do, or just being a part of that organization, they have responsibilities. They need to be held accountable for that as well, because that helps, again, build that connection piece. It helps build the trust and the safety, because if everybody is held accountable, it results in consistent behavior, and it means that we feel safe in our environment. Then there needs to be a bias for action. We can't expect our people to perform if we tie their hands in terms of what they can and cannot do. Okay, so we need to actively encourage people to bring up ideas, bring up solutions to problems, and then actually say, okay, well, you brought this problem to me, and I want to see what the action plan is behind it. And let's see if this is viable. We can roll it out, and we can manage and evaluate and implement, and go from there. No purpose trying to hold somebody accountable for poor performance if you don't give them the ability to take practical action. And then that translates into consistent delivery. Okay. There's a very nice Simon Sinek talk for those of you who want to Google it or check it out on YouTube, where he talks about organizations that make the mistake of simply validating or attaching value to people who hit their results, okay, only. So this person might be all over the map. They're up, they're down, but eventually at the end of the quarter, they achieve their target, and we say, well done, and we give them a bonus. Versus those teams or those individuals who are consistently improving on their performance. When it comes time for the review, okay, maybe they haven't quite hit the target, but their trajectory has generally been in an upwards direction. That's the team I actually want. Because at the end of the day, they're going to eventually meet that target that's been set for them, and they're going to exceed it. And I can rely on them, versus that individual who sort of is a bit of a hit and a miss. So this quarter he hit the target, yay, but next quarter he's all over the place. You can't plan around that. You can't work with that. Okay, so we need to relook at how we value our performance and how we actually capitalize on it. And then lastly, very importantly, attitude. And again, this comes from management down. You cannot work in an environment where everybody is constantly moaning and complaining and only highlighting the negative. We're social human beings, we pull energy from each other, and likewise, we can sap energy from each other. And we need to start calling people out on their attitudes. I'm not saying that people shouldn't feel free to be able to bring problems to the table. Certainly they need to, because otherwise we cannot address them. But there's a way to do it in a way that doesn't just unnecessarily pull everybody down. Again, it speaks to that connection piece. You cannot build a team that is truly connected if you have individuals that are constantly pessimistic and constantly bringing the energy of the team down. And then finally, we need to start developing that growth mindset more than ever. We keep talking about how resilience is linked to developing, learning, improving ourselves. And if we don't foster that at an organizational level, by encouraging our staff members to read more, to try new things, to engage with us and teach us something as managers, we're not going to instill that attitude. And that is where innovation eventually will spring from. Okay, so as a team or as an organization, these are the things that the pillars that need to be put into place. Again, it's going to be a gradual process. You start at point A and you move along, and you make sure periodically that you are revisiting these areas and include your team members in this process, because you cannot, as a leader, do it all. It's going to require everybody's participation. Okay. So what is going to happen? We've now spoken about resilience. You know, maybe you're going to go back into your place of work and you're going to share what you heard. You're going to run a couple of programs maybe with your staff member in terms of resilience and what it means, and hope that they start adopting those particular actions or behaviors. And are you going to see a result overnight? No. Sorry, you're not. This is going to be a process, okay? But there is a way for you to ensure that that shift happens sooner rather than later. So this is tied up with a very useful concept that, again, you can go and look up online. Is the diffusion of innovation model. Originally, it was applied to how rapidly does a product become accepted and popular over time. So they tend to use examples like Amazon and their iPod. You know, why did that take off so rapidly versus other organizations that produced similar products at actually a better quality, and yet it never got off the ground, and it doesn't exist anymore for those brands. And so what they've identified is that typically, if you look at the population, whenever a new idea is introduced, you've got those 2.5% that we call innovators. So those are the guys that actually come up with the idea, your wild and crazy people that think, okay, this is going to be an awesome idea. And they develop that concept. Okay. Then you got 13.5% of the population that are what we call early adopters. So these are the guys who stood in a queue for 3, 4, 5 hours just to get the latest iPhone. They want, as soon as that technology comes out, as soon as that idea comes out, they're there, they want to implement, they're keen to see how this is going to work. Your next group of about 34% are your early majority. So again, they sort of wait for your early adopters to try out the idea. If they see it works quite well, then they're all for it. They'll spend the money, they'll try the idea out. Your late majority, the other 34%, takes them a little bit longer. They're like, no, I want to see that this product really works. So, you know, they wait 6 months, 7 months. Okay, I'm going to get on board now. And then you get the 16% that just, the only reason they change is because the products that they typically use have now been discontinued. So those guys that were using a flip phone and eventually only stopped using it because they never manufactured them anymore. Okay, so that's the typical distribution. So how do you use this knowledge in the concept of resilience to try and get your organization on board sooner rather than later. And what they're saying is, you've got to focus on your innovators and your early adopters. Okay, so your innovators are the guys that are going to come up with the new ideas on how you can incorporate aspects of resilience into your workplace. And your early adopters are going to be the ones that actually help put it into practice and start changing the mindset of those around them. And with those early adopters, you need to identify the staff members that have a wide network or base, that are influencers, they're trusted. So the other people in the organization look up to them, they respect them, they believe what they have to say, they're very persuasive individuals. If you can get them to buy into it, they can bring that early majority with them much more quickly, and the process can spread much more rapidly in your organization. So when you start to look at how to create these resilient teams, this is the kind of stuff you're going to have to be looking at. Who are the guys who are going to conceptualize it? And who are the guys that are going to be the first ones to run with it? And are they influential enough and persuasive enough in the organization to drag everybody else along with them at a more rapid rate? Okay, and this works for pretty much any new change that you're trying to implement in your organization. This is the kind of process you have to look at getting it adopted and put into action at a quicker rate. Okay, so the bad news is that initially, at least, it's going to be a lot of hard work, it's going to be slow, and the momentum is going to take a while. So what they refer to the Sisyphus effect comes from Greek mythology, where he was constantly trying to push this boulder up a hill and it constantly rolled back on him. Until eventually he reaches what is called the tipping point. And that is when he has built up sufficient momentum for it to then suddenly take off, and it just goes down at an accelerated rate, and that becomes what we call the snowball effect. It just goes quicker and it builds and it builds and it builds. So what I'm trying to say to you is, please don't give up before you have hit that tipping point. Don't tell me, oh, Lynette, I've tried some of the stuff, it's been 3 months, nothing seems to have worked, it doesn't have any meaning, it's not of value to me. It's not going to work as quick as that. You need to put in the time, the effort, until you reach that tipping point, and then you're going to see massive and accelerated change. And I spoke, when we spoke a little bit about the COVID effect and how that is impacting us as a society. It's the same thing. It's a massive change that is now accelerating growth and development and change at a massive rate that we never ever could have envisioned. And that can happen in a good way as well, for the activities and the stuff that you're rolling out in your organization. So you're going to have to put in the grind, and the team that is behind it is going to have to be aware of that, and which means that there's going to have to be a supportive network behind them to say you're on the right track, you're doing the right things. At some point, you guys are going to reach that point where it just really does turn and reach that tipping point. Okay, so do not give up before you've put in the effort. Okay, so we're doing okay for time. So I want to unpack this one a little bit. I said to you, to me, I don't have kids, but there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that we need to do something with this generation to try and equip them for what's coming ahead. We have graduates from universities stepping out into a work world that is completely different to what it was before. Unemployment is massively high. The nature of work has changed completely. So these guys are not walking into the environments that you and I walked into back in the day. Your kids who are still at school are suddenly having to learn in a completely different way, having to socialize with their friends in a completely different way. You've got little kids walking around with masks. That's what they are now familiar with. That's their normal. And how do we go about equipping our kids to bring them along for the ride, so that by the time they actually are in the positions that we're in, that this is already second nature to them and they can just roll with it. So they've come up with 10 points that you can sort of, as a parent or as a teacher or anybody who has interaction with children, can start to roll out in an attempt to instill the resilience factor in them. So the first point that they talk about is already start to help them focus on the things that they're doing well in a particular day, okay? So there we're starting to build on the self-belief aspect, starting to get them to get a true understanding of, you know, what their strength areas are, what they have control over, and what they can do in a meaningful way, okay? This is not about giving kids prizes for absolutely everything that they do. I don't believe in that. I don't think it serves any purpose to them, but it is about getting a true reflection for themselves of what I can do well and what have I contributed today. Then second point from that, we've spoken a bit about now, is that from those 3 good things, that's where they're going to identify what their strength areas are. And more importantly, so how can they use that? So if they've identified today, one of the things that they've done well is that they made one of their friends who was very sad smile. Okay, so what does that mean my strength is? My strength is connecting with people. My strength is in building people's self-esteem. Okay, so how can I utilize that going forward? Okay, well, that's going to help me in teamwork. In group work sessions where we have to do projects together. That's going to be my strength. I'm going to sort of be that leader. Or maybe I should consider a job or activity that allows me to fulfill that function. Okay. Now the third point is to support the student to learn some breathing techniques, to learn how to calm their body down during times of stress. That sounds kind of like dim, but our kids are not wired for this. That you don't get born knowing how to de-stress. And once we become caught up in that panic, our brains do not function. We cannot do what we need to do to think rationally. We need to learn those coping techniques early on. So helps your children to learn how to control their physical symptoms, how to control their behaviors subsequent to that, and helps them to regain that focus. Okay, then 4, they need to become aware of exactly what happens to themselves physically when they are under stress. Okay, so they need to realize what are the signs of stress for themselves. Is it that their hands start to shake? Is it that their heart start to beat really fast? Do they get flushed? Do they suddenly start to just, you know, viciously attack people verbally? What is their reaction to stress? So that they can recognize that in the moment that it happens, realize what it is, and either stop it, walk away, or turn it into something more meaningful or more valuable. Okay. Then 5, reinforce healthy behaviors. Okay, so we spoke about how one of the things where we fall off the bus completely is our stamina, because we do not look after ourselves from a psychological health point of view, from a social health point of view, and from a physical health point of view. And what are we teaching our kids? What do they do? Are they practicing healthy behaviors? We need to start it earlier. So getting that regular exercise, getting into good sleeping habits, and realizing that they need to take a rest. The world at the moment is functioning 24/7. And our kids need to learn that it's okay to sometimes take some downtime and just chill and relax and get that renewed energy and focus back. Okay. Then point 6 is that we need to support our students to build a resilience plan. So what that involves is helping them to identify what are the factors that they possess that makes them resilient, so that they can capitalize on those in situations that they find challenging or where there are obstacles, or identify the areas where they are totally lacking that they can start working on and start building on now. So we looked at the pillars for an individual of what helps build flexibility. Those are the things that you can start working on with your kids. What does their self-esteem look like? What does their support network look like? All of those, do they have like an attitude of enthusiasm for learning? Which pillars are they good at? Capitalize on those. Which are the ones where they need to do a little bit of work, and use that to equip them going forward. Giving them regular feedback is also important, so that again, that they can develop and grow. There's a huge disconnect, I think, between parents and children in terms of meaningful communication. Everything has become about the practicalities of life. What time do I need to drop you off there? What did you get on your test? And that personal conversation of actual meaningful information is often being lost. And I'm speaking here as a non-parent, and you're probably all rolling your eyes at me saying there is no time in the day to do this. And I'm not arguing with you in that regard. That is why it is a huge commitment to be a parent, because this stuff is important to do. And it does require sacrifice on your part. But my belief is that the positive outcome from it, allowing your children to flourish, the ability for them to function in a more caring, sharing relationship with you, will ultimately have the benefits that allow you to validate that sacrifice. Then point 8 says it's very important to provide them with scenarios where they need to actually learn to problem solve. We live in an era where if you don't know something, you can quickly Google it. You can watch a YouTube video on how to do something. Your parents just, I don't have the time to teach you how to do this, I'm just going to sort it out for you. And that robs them of the ability to learn how to problem solve. So when they come to you initially with a problem or a challenge or an issue, they need to be given the space to say, okay, look, let's talk about it. You're not going to go away, come back with some potential ideas, and we'll talk through those scenarios to see whether or not you can come up with a potential solution or action. It is something that is sadly lacking in the workplace at the moment. And it's, as an HR manager, I will tell you, one of the problems that we have with our younger staff members coming in is that as soon as they hit an obstacle or a problem, the very first instinct is to go to a manager and say, this has gone wrong, what do I do? There isn't even an attempt made to say, okay, well, I thought a bit about it and I think I should do this and this. Can you guide me as to whether this is the correct decision? And that is ultimately so frustrating in a workplace. We need people with initiative, and that needs to start early. Okay, then point 9 says that we need to support and encourage them to build positive support networks. Again, we live in a era where shaming is done on public platforms. People are very quick to tear down as opposed to build up. So we need to start encouraging our young people to connect with individuals who are actually positive forms of support that they can really pull from during times of stress, as opposed to quickly putting something on Instagram and hoping that they get 100 likes that'll make them feel better. Those 100 likes don't mean anything because it's coming from people that you don't even really know, versus one person in your life actually has meaning for you, telling you, validating you that you've done a good job, I'm here for you. Okay, so we need to start transitioning them in that regard. And then finally, when a student or your child makes a mistake, make them aware that there are actually opportunities for them to learn from this. Don't just moan at them, yell at them, or fix it for them. Take them through the process to identify, okay, what went wrong here? Were you able to fix it? What have you learned from this experience that will be better going forward? So that they start to be comfortable with the notion of, I can take a risk, I can make a mistake, as long as I'm learning from it and developing from it and taking responsibility for it, it's not the end of the world. That is going to be what instills that resilience in those individuals. It's going to be what allows them to be the innovators for the future and to become comfortable with uncertainty and the situation that is currently our reality and which is going to be our reality going forward. Okay, so lots of me talking. I just want to direct you to some Resources, I am going to, as I said, send the slide deck through, so you guys will have the information. If there's any queries that you have, you're welcome to obviously reach out to me. There's also a very nice website called positivepsychology.com, and on that there are certain worksheets that you can do as an individual, that you can do with your teams, or you can even do with your children, to start to equip you in these areas. It gives you practical experience in how to put this into action. So I would encourage that you go and check them out. There's also quite a few useful articles on there for you to read if you have the time. I will send some of those exercises through to Sam to distribute to you as well. And then from your side, opening the floor, any last questions or thoughts that you would like to share at this juncture? Feel free to pop something in the chat box or put up your hand.
I don't see anything at the moment. Lynette, that was very interesting.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, not a problem. As I said, I know that it's a lot of information to process, and you need to have the time to sort of go and think a bit about it for yourself as an individual and for your organization. So if you have questions that come to mind post the presentation, these are my contact details, which will be in the slide deck that Sam sends through. Pop me an email, give me a call if you need to, if you want further information on any of the topics that were covered, happy to do that. What we also are extending to everybody who was on today's call is, as I mentioned, I'm a psychometrist. We do have a behavioral assessment that speaks to elements of resilience that can maybe help give you some insight into which areas you need to work on, and we are offering everybody on today's call that assessment free of charge. So you can just drop me a line to say that you'd be interested in receiving that link. We'll send it through. It's done online. It's a 15 to 20 minute assessment that you do, and then I'll be happy to send you the comprehensive report from there as well. So making that available to you. Otherwise, that's it from my side. Thank you, everybody, for joining, for taking the time, for showing an interest in the topic, and certainly to Sam and her team for organizing everything.
No problem. I think everyone's had some great insight from today's chat. So you've caused some powerful, and what's in the chat box there says powerful, informative. Yeah, so the words are very big, So thank you very much. Yes. I think it's something to think about.
Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great day and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
No, Lynette, it's Les Holbrook here. I was just saying thank you very much. I certainly had to smile when you said to me that we tend to be resistant to change.
Yes.
But I think today, if we don't change, we don't survive. So very clearly, it is an adjustment in terms
very
of
much so. And, that's why that is the one area where I, as an individual, am choosing to look at this whole COVID epidemic in a positive way, because that is exactly who I was, and in some ways still am. I'm not a massive fan of change, but at the moment, it's actually gotten to a point now where I stress significantly less over the little changes that happen day to day, because we've already experienced this massive one. So when my boss comes into the office and says, oh, I need you to suddenly tackle this task, I don't panic initially, because let's face it, in the landscape of all that is COVID, this is something small. This is something I can deal with and adapt to. So it gives you that bit of perspective. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's a skill that we and our children need.
So we're building new character. But Lynette, thank you very much for your input. It's been very insightful.
Huge pleasure. Thank you so much.
Take care.
All right, guys. We will be signing out next week. We have a new team on board, Aon. They're going to be talking cybercrime. So those who would like to join us for then, you can RSVP. And the Chamber's Golf Day is coming up. So it would be great to have our 4 balls and tees and green sponsors. So looking forward to the next Connect with the Chamber. Be safe until then. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye, everyone.
Perfect. Bye, everyone.